Ladies and gentlemen,
I'm full of optimism.
Einstein's theory of relativity.
We're still seeing it quite well through that haze. T-minus 37 seconds.
The fight is growing confidence.
E equals MC.
That all men are created equal.
About the future innovations.
And growing strength in the air.
Tear down this way. Head on. Something's happening. Coming up on staging.
This is Finding Your Frequency with your hosts, Jeff Spinard and Ryan Treasure. It's time to speak up, share your voice, and hear from the thought leaders.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another fantastic episode of Finding Your Frequency. I am your host for the day, Ryan Treasure, and want to give a big shout out to everybody out there listening. And of course, if you're listening on your favorite podcatcher device, please make sure you like and share it with your friends and give us 5 stars because it's way better than 4. And we have a bang up show for you guys today as we continue through our series of speaking with the Rich Dad advisors to Robert Kiyosaki. And what a great and exciting moment these interviews have become. We talked to Andy Tanner about paper assets. We talked to Tom Wheelwright about taxes, Ken McElroy about real estate, and then Blair Singer about business and sales. And we had Garrett Sutton on talking about all the legal components and do you start an LLC? Do you go C Corp, S Corp, and what are the reasons behind why people do what they do? And we're gonna round out the rest of the Rich Dad advisors today with Josh and Lisa Lannon, who are entrepreneurship experts, and I want to welcome you guys to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking time. I know as being entrepreneurs, you guys are busy all the time. Something that we talk about on the radio show quite frequently is, you know, your standard person has a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 6, 8, 9, a 10-hour day, but that just doesn't exist when you're an entrepreneur. You're kind of going full bore 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. In fact, like right before we got on here, I got a text from Tom Spooner, our co-founder, and he asked me a question if I'd reached out to someone yet. And I said, no, I need about 70 more hours in my day. So, yeah, it never stops.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. I've been here at the Voice America Talk Radio Network for about 16 years. And about 10 years ago, I became a partial partner in the business. And my whole life changed at that point because I was no longer just responsible for my small fraction of tasks. And now I am looking after, the entire operation in many capacities and working with our other partners. And I went from being an employee to being an entrepreneur. So crazy, right?
And congrats on the transition, because not everyone makes it. It's difficult, and just like you're mentioning with there is no clock out. You're an entrepreneur. It has to be a lifestyle. There's no clock in, clock out. You're always on.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I actually had somebody ask me the other day, they're like, why do you give, we have like 500 customers, and when we do training for our radio show hosts and, ongoing training, I always give them my cell phone number, and people are like, why do you do that? And I'm like, well, number one, if you've ever tried to manage 2 phones, it's terrible. Number 2, why would I not give all my customers my phone number? If they need to get a hold of me, send me a text message, that's fine. There's this really cool thing in technology on your phone called Do Not Disturb mode. And so, when it's time for family time, you just turn that on and away you go. People can leave messages.
Yep, I agree with you 100% on that one.
So, finding your frequency for us is all about, the journey. In our promo, one of the things that we say is, you have to summon the intestinal fortitude to get out and try and do something different than you've been doing. Get out from that standard 9 to 5 and stop living somebody else's dream and live your own dream. And, I want to kind of just start at the beginning for you guys, because I know you have an extremely interesting story on, how you ended up where you are today. But I want to kind of go back to that beginnings of, back when Josh was running nightclubs and you were a law enforcement officer, Lisa, and kind of just where did all of this get started and how did you guys find your frequency?
Great question. You want me to kick it off, Lisa?
Sure, go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, because it started in our 20s. we were having fun, running and gunning in Vegas, and I was running nightclubs, and Lisa was working in law enforcement. So the joke was I'd get people drunk and she'd book them in jail. We had the full circle all the way around. And that was our frequency, if you will, back then. We had our blinds were over our windows all the time. We slept during the day. We were up at night. She worked the graveyard shift too. So that was a different type of rhythm or frequency. And we did well in it, but it was killing me physically, emotionally, spiritually. It was draining. And what happens one night, Lisa came home in uniform, and I'd been out on about a 3-day bender out partying. And when I came to kind of, and opened my eyes, I saw Lisa above me. She said, well, before she said anything, what I saw was the woman I fell in love with. Because in my partying, I had lost myself, and she had lost herself too. It takes two to be in a relationship. So the codependency, the enabling. So she had her side of it too. But what I saw that night was it was done. The gig was up. I could see it in her eyes. And what she said changed my life. She goes, Josh, either you go to rehab tonight or I'm going to divorce you. And that was really what started to change the frequency of our life and made a major shift. It was her strength to say enough is enough.
Well, and anyone that deals with addiction or has a loved one, a family member, or themselves, or in the field, we understand the heartache. We understand that codependency. And being in law enforcement, I dealt with it all night at work. And then I'd come home and I'd deal with it at home too. And over the course of, 6 years or so, I gave up a part of who I was to that addiction. I gave up a part of my own independence and my own strength at home. Solid when I went to work or was out, but at home I gave up that piece of me. So yeah, it was about 2 months after 9/11 happened, and I just was not ready. I did not want to deal with it anymore. And I was ready to honor that boundary of either divorce or rehab. It was his choice. He could come with me on a different path of frequency, a different path of life, or he could go out on his own. And thankfully he did choose rehab, and he went later that next day.
Well, what an interesting part of your guys' story. I've dealt with a family member that had some substance abuse things going on and all that kind of stuff. And what was weird is, I tried so hard to, get them to help themselves. I mean, because you guys know this probably better than anybody. Like, no one's going to go get help unless they're actually ready to go get help. And, I kept getting phone calls and, messages saying, hey, I need this, I need help, I need money, I need this, I need that. And I'm like, nah, if I give you money, that's just giving you, like a path to go back to doing what you're doing. And,
exactly.
I finally had to just say, look, you go to rehab and you show me that you're trying, and then I'll try, because I can't sit here and just, catch phone calls at 10 o'clock at night randomly because you ran out of drug money and you just want to get high.
Exactly.
And it was like the toughest thing ever, because this was like a family member of mine. And, then they had a problem where they didn't have a place to live. And then as they're going through their addiction, and then they're asking me to come stay at my house. And I'm going, wait a minute, I can't do that to my wife, my kids, the dog, even the dogs, they're not fair to any of it. And so it's definitely a tough thing to deal with.
I think that's where the term love you to death comes from. I mean, you're literally loving them till they die because of the behavior and because of the path that they're on. That's where healthy boundaries come in, is to have that healthy boundary. Says, I love you, but I'm not going to enable these behaviors. You go to rehab tonight, you do these steps, or whatever boundaries you have, you put those in place and you hold to them. Because believe me, I lied, I manipulated, I cried, I'm sorry, honey, this time's different. I went through the whole gamut. And finally, it was like, the gig is up. It's done. And I was ready to change. I just didn't know how to. So it took the strength of a family member, of a loved one, saying, enough's enough. This is how we're going to do it. And it worked for me.
And boundaries are hard. I always, when I talk to people who have family members in the throes of addiction, I'm like, you have to find a boundary you will stick with. if you go for some long, big boundary that you know you're going to violate, it's not going to work. So sometimes it's baby steps, setting those boundaries, but eventually you'll get to the point where, nope, I can hold this one, and hopefully they'll get help.
Yeah, well, and I think, for you guys, always love to hear that everything worked out in the end, and, you guys were able to move from that portion of your life. And so how did life after rehab go for you guys? Where did you go after that?
Well, I completed the program, and Lisa and I did quite a bit of couples work together too, because we were on this journey together. Really, we united hand in hand in marriage and in life at rehab, even though we'd been married for a few years prior to that. So we joined hands, went back to Las Vegas, and I went back to running clubs. It's like, I just can't do this anymore. I can't be part of the problem. We were good at our work, at our job. We got a lot of people drunk, helped connect them, people with one-night stands, but it was like, okay, then what? DUIs and broken marriages. It's like, I'm done with it. So talking to Lisa is like, I'm ready to leave this field. I met the owner of the treatment center that I went through, became friends with him, and he planted a seed that he would teach me the industry. So we had a way out. I had a mentor. So we called him up, and I asked him, I said, Spencer, would you teach me this industry? And he said, absolutely. So that was our way out.
Well, and not only that, the night I picked up Josh from rehab, it was Christmas Eve, and his father was out in California. We had dinner with him and his brother. And when we were getting ready to leave to drive back to Vegas, his dad came up and said, hey, I got this gift for you. And it was a infomercial, in a series of CDs by Robert Kiyosaki called Choose to Be Rich. Mm-hmm. And, we're like, okay. And he made us promise to listen to it. And so on our way back, we put in the first CD, and we realized hours later, we were just sitting in our driveway listening to it. That really unlocked a whole new world. We were ready for it. They always say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And we were ready. There was our next teacher. And he talked about we have a choice in life. And, when we look at it, it's not just choose to be rich. It's choose to be rich in health, wealth, and happiness. It's the whole person, maybe not just one road or one path. And that along with the owner of the treatment facility offering Josh mentorship really unlocked that door for our next journey.
Great point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting how some of those things in life just kind of happen in an order that's not necessarily planned, but it makes you feel like that there's like a bigger plan for you or for you guys together than what you had initially started, and then getting those audios to listen to was probably something that changed your guys' lives forever. I mean, forever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to meet Robert several times. I live in Phoenix, and so he's here in town, and he's come into the studio, and we've chatted. He's been on many radio shows, and he's actually getting ready to be at an event here locally as well, which I'm trying to get to. But one of the things that always resonated with me with some of the things that he talks about is what you just mentioned, Lisa, and that's just, being rich isn't necessarily rich in the talk of, oh, I just have a bunch of money, but being rich spiritually, mentally, healthy physically, all of those things all kind of play, because you can't enjoy wealth or money if you don't have the rest of your ducks in a row, so to speak.
Right. Otherwise, you'll end up the rest of your life as you get older spending all your wealth on your health as when you get sick. And that was something that we really took a look at. I got out of rehab and was like, okay, alcoholic in recovery, I don't want anything to control me ever again. Not like that. And with listening to Kiyosaki and studying the Rich Dad philosophy, I was like, holy crap, I'm addicted to money. And that was like a punch in the gut. It's like, oh, really? Yeah, take away someone's paycheck for 2 weeks and you watch a detox happen. People get crazy. And it's like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that person that's addicted to money. So we had to figure out how to make money work for us and become masters of money instead of it mastering us. So our businesses had to be bigger than money. It had to have purpose behind it and mission and team. Money is a byproduct of that. So if we made a bunch of money, then that would be just more of a drug, and we never wanted to just chase it.
Yeah, that's funny because that was actually one of the questions I had, and I've seen this happen several times to different people who have gone through similar circumstances to you, where you have this addiction to A, B, and C. You go through rehabilitation, but then you end up just exchanging one addiction for another addiction, and so you're not truly self-aware in that capacity. Like a lot of times you might be addicted to like alcohol and drugs, but then you pick up a smoking cigarettes habit or something like that, right? And you just kind of trade it off. How did you make sure that didn't happen with you? I know that you said you were addicted to money, but how did you make sure to give yourself that purpose and make sure that you guys were following a path that wasn't just about money? Because I feel the same way like about my radio show. I don't just do this radio show because I have a few sponsors here and there and I make a couple of bucks on it. I do it because telling stories like this and telling individuals about entrepreneurism, about the struggle, about all of the components that go into it, from like I mentioned earlier, all the different advisors that are on, that's really the purpose of this, is helping people find their frequency by listening to how other people found their frequency.
Got it. No, it's a good question, because it happened to me. At first, I was addicted to business and then addicted to AA, and I just channeled all that energy into it. And it's like, okay, is this a gift or is it a curse? So through personal development seminars and events and reading, it's like, okay, let me channel this in the right direction where it's not detrimental to my life, to my health, to my family, where I'm not just grinding it out 24 hours a day. And in that, it's like, okay, I can tell you, don't be addicted to money. But if you're struggling financially, that's hard to wrap your head around. It's like, look, I got to feed my kids. I got to pay my bills. So with like that Maslow hierarchy of need, is once you have a base of security, your house, you can live in your house, you're going to feed your family, the lights are on. That's when you can start to build that self-actualization. It's like, okay, I got my base taken care of. How can I now use my energy and my work to be more purpose driven? Because if not, there is a roller coaster where you go into scarcity. I do, if I can't feed my kids.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
No. So what are your thoughts, Lisa?
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's like we have to have that base security before we can start going after what we love, what we do. Because if we're always in scarcity mode or always chasing money just to survive, we're not going to go anywhere. And I don't even know if that made sense, but it goes back to education. We're big on education. Learn about money, learn how money works for you, learn, about your health, learn about happiness, learn about personal development. They're all combined. And once you get educated, then you can really start making those decisions that are going to work for you. Because, everyone has their own success of what rich is, or their own success of happiness. So we all have to find what works for us, and then we can start making those achievements. And education is the first key.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I don't know if you guys know a guy named Greg Champion. He's from the Los Angeles area. He is a rehabilitation guy. He had some similar experiences to you, Josh, and, runs a couple of rehab centers there. But I was doing an interview with him, and we were talking about, that type of thing. And, we were joking about like, oh, well, what is real success, and, him and I are both fathers of daughters. And so we, at the end of the interview, we both agreed that our success is just knowing that we grew up, we fathered children that are well adjusted. that would be like the ultimate ultimate success, right? It's great if you have money and you can buy them a car and you can get them a college education, but do they understand how to manage their emotions? Do they understand what it is to live in a society that's ever changing, with technology always nagging at your hip, and understanding some of those kind of things? So we both agreed that was what it was for us. We wanted well adjusted children.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great point.
So, as you guys are talking about, your frequency and how you went from one thing to another and all that, what, Lisa, what did you guys do to raise money to like start your business in the beginning?
It wasn't fun. I mean, this was back in the days of dial-up internet, if you can think AOL and that noise it made. So trying to find business plans and, a few templates. We spent hours. Our home office was just littered with stuff on the wall, and how are we going to get this? And we started out by going to banks, and all the banks said, well, you really need to go back to school and become counselors. And both of us were like, well, we don't want to become counselors. We want to hire the best. We want people that are already working in the field to be counselors for our clientele. This is when we were starting our first rehab facility. And so they would kick us out. They'd say, oh, well, maybe we'll give you a car loan or this or that. So we just kept going to bank after bank and just started getting that education. What are they looking for? What can we do? And we ended up going to the private sector. And Josh actually had the first meeting, and he can talk more about that with we called him an angel investor at the time. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he literally threw the business plan at Josh and said, your business plan sucks. Get out of my office. And it was going back 3 times. The third time I went with, and we just sat down and told our stories and, what happened and why we wanted to do what we were going to do. And that's when he believed in us and loaned us the money.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's interesting. 3 times. Your angel investor was a stickler for that business model, huh?
Well, he was the only one that would actually talk to us. so I kept calling him back. I'd go down my list, and it got smaller and smaller, and he'd actually take the call. And going through the process, what I found out is it wasn't the business plan. He wanted to see if we could handle the rejection. He wanted to see if we could get knocked around and get back up on our feet and keep going.
That's interesting. You and I, a little bit before the show, we were talking about martial arts. And that's funny that you bring that up. That was something that I got taught. My friend Winston and I were talking about this. And there was a time when I was doing martial arts where, I was going to the dojo every other day, hitting it up on Saturdays for 4 or 5 hours, just absorbing as much as I possibly could. And my Sifu told me, he's like, you come here too much. Don't come back anymore. And I was like, what did I do wrong? You mad at me?
It hurts, right?
Yeah, and ultimately what it ended up being was he was testing whether I was going to continue down the path, because I was getting ready to test for another belt. And in that set of belts, as you know, things start to get quite rigorous, and you have to be prepared for those higher end belts. And so that was the lesson that my Sifu was teaching me at the time. Is he was teaching me, well, are you going to do this? Are you going to get the rejection? And I did. I'm like, oh, you told me not to come back. I shouldn't go. And I'm like, I'm going to go anyways. What is he going to do? Beat me up? He's been doing that for years already anyway.
Right.
And so then I go back, and he's like, I told you not to come back here. You're not ready. You need to go. You need to go take some time off. You need to get out of here. And and I went back for the 3rd day. And on the 3rd day was when he finally told me, you know what? All of that was just a test. I wanted to see if you would keep coming back, even though I told you not to. And so that's definitely an important lesson to learn. I think is a lesson in resiliency.
It's so true. And I think we get caught up in, it's like the example of the business plan. It's the business plan. It's the business plan. It had nothing to do with that. And that's where people get stuck. It's like, can you get your butt off the floor when you get knocked down? When a bank tells you no, when a private investor tells you no, when whatever, can you get back up on your feet and say, hey, what did I learn? What am I going to do differently next time? And let's move forward. And that's what an entrepreneur really is, one that can, unfortunately, take a beating. And if you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough at least.
And it's how bad do we want it,
Yeah. Yeah, my wife and I always joke too. We watch sports together, and we'll be watching the teams because, once I'm an Arizona Cardinals fan for NFL, so once the Cardinals are out of the playoff, then we start looking at which teams are going to be in it, and so it's funny. We literally sit there and we looking at the players, and we're like, do you think that quarterback wants it more than that quarterback, or And I love to use sports analogies, but it's a very good way to help people to understand some of the things around business. You go out in the force with a plan. You get out there, and you're going to get knocked down. Do you get back up? And watching offensive linemen and defensive linemen just get beat up and knocked down all the time is a perfect example of an entrepreneur.
That's it. In martial arts, going back to that, I love stand-up martial arts. Got pretty good. American Kempo, Ed Parker system through Paul Mills. Loved it. And then I started ground fighting, and I was a fish out of water. I was like, oh my gosh. So I had to literally go back to a white belt and start learning that rank system and that process of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because there was a whole other aspect to the art that I missed. And now I can incorporate the two together. But it's like, are you humble enough to say, I don't know this, please teach me, and be teachable?
That's funny that you bring that up too, because I always tell people, like, you know, depending on what martial arts that you're doing, like if you do karate and stand up stuff, you don't really know a whole lot until you get into into the other forms where you're forced to be like face to face, right? Like
right.
Like I always my buddy's a wrestler, right? So he wrestled in high school and all that kind of stuff, and he does multiple martial arts, and you know, him and I firmly believe that people who come from a jiu-jitsu and wrestling background ultimately become the most well-rounded martial artists, because they're not afraid to, you know, get in those tight spaces that happens in wrestling and jiu-jitsu.
That's it. And that's what happens in life. Hey, the bills are coming in, pressure, I can't get any sales, whatever it is. Like, okay, relax, breathe. I've been here before. I can get out of this. Instead of panicking, which most people do, I've been guilty of it, and making the situation worse. That's what martial arts teaches. Like, all right, you're already in a crappy situation. Don't make it worse. Don't be stupid.
Yeah.
Breathe, relax. You can get out of this. You're okay, and find a way out.
So, Lisa, what is your advice for people who want to start their own company? How would you give them some nuggets of information on some things they should know before they step outside of their comfort zone?
Well, first, it would be to find a mentor or coach. Find someone who's actually walking the walk, who's doing it in real life, not just from books or teachers. You want someone who can give you those practical applications. What I've learned is, we've had many mentors and coaches throughout our years doing this, and they're so willing to share. We come from a space where we want others to succeed. There's enough success and abundance in the world that, let's help each other out. So finding that coach or mentor who's willing to share with you the mistakes, the lessons learned, the wins, so we don't have to repeat them ourselves. Anytime we can learn a mistake from someone else and not go through that pain, I think is great. So that's step number one. And then really find out, what's your why? What gets you going every day? You're going into business. What's the true reason why? It has to get you up every morning. When it's late nights, working all night, it's got to keep you going. You got to be sustainable with what you want to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad that you brought that up. Sustainability, and I joke with my wife and I say, "What is your stick-to-itiveness?" I want to expand a little bit on one thing that you brought up about coaches and mentors, and I think this is an important topic for people in general, because you're on social media, you're on, Instagram and Facebook, and you see all of these, ads for like, I'm a guru in this and I'm a guru in that, and you can spend this amount of money and I'm going to help you do that. I want to remind people that is not a mentor, right? A mentor doesn't charge you for their time. They do that because they're giving back. Right. And I think that's something that's important for people to understand is, they shouldn't get the coach or the mentor twisted with the paid coach or paid mentor.
Correct. Yeah. Otherwise they're just a consultant. You're paying for their time, and we don't know if they have the experience or not. That's why I always like to find someone that's walked the walk. They've been there. They've got the ground experience, because business is a contact sport. As you guys are talking martial arts, you're going to get hit, maybe not physically, but you've got to learn to take those hits and keep going. Yeah,
that's 100%. So as you guys were, starting this newly found business and, helping people down their path to rehabilitation, and obviously you eventually got some funding, you got that off the ground. How did you make sure that as you were riding that path that you guys were surrounding yourselves with people that had the same mission in their hearts as you guys did, that they were, so to speak, riding the same skateboard that you rode?
That's a good question, because we made a lot of mistakes, and we still do, not as many as we used to, as far as onboarding, recruiting, and hiring staff. At the beginning we thought, okay, it's the credentials. You have the acronyms at the end of your name. You've got the schooling. Okay, you're qualified. And it's like, no. That just gets the person to the table. It's the cultural fit is huge when building a business. Does this person fit your culture? What are your company core values? What's your mission statement? What's your vision? Can they get behind that? And then do you have a selection process in the beginning to put that candidate through it, so you know at the end of it, through pressure, if that's the person that's right for the team? Because it's usually, people know how to game an interview. You game it, they get hired, and it's about 2 months later, you're like, holy crap. Now, because you just found out who this person really is by their behaviors, it's like, man, I wish there was a way I could fast track that and find out what this person's like under pressure way before we've now spent all this time and money training them, and the person's not a fit. And it's not fair to them either. That's a big one. One of the things we've done for that selection process, one tool for our financial departments, is we play cash flow one-on-one with them. We want to see what they're like. Can they even read a financial statement? They show up as experts, but once you put them in the game, oh my gosh, we've seen some amazing stuff come out of it. And you see their behaviors, because reflection, the game will bring out people's behaviors. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's funny that you bring up that cash flow game. I think every other of the 6 advisors have brought that up, and we all touched on it a little bit, because it's like I haven't played cash flow with my kid yet, but we really like to play Monopoly, right? Because of some of the same reasons. And it is amazing to watch a 6-year-old get angry about having hotels on her spots of land on the board, and I'm like,
it's awesome.
And I tell my wife, I'm like, we're in trouble later. This kid is, she's tenacious, and she's like, I want all of the hotels.
Like, what did I create?
And I'm like,
but that's the beauty of it. Once they understand how money works, the doors are wide open. And the same with employees or onboarding staff members, is once they understand money or the position, and they have a strong connection to it, that strong why they want to be in the field or do what they're going to do, those doors are open. And I love watching the kids when they light up when they finally get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 100%. I do a lot of hiring here at Voice America. I manage our broadcast operation, so I work with audio engineers and video and audio editors and all that kind of stuff. And I take the same approach with them. We're not dealing with money-based components like in that space, but in my interview, I'm like, here's a hard drive. There's a computer right there. Can you edit something out of that for me? And really put them under task, because you're 100% correct. You can have a great interview and answer all the questions right, but can you work through what we're asking you to do, and can you problem solve in real time? And the other thing for us too is, we do a lot of customer facing things, so it's really important for me that somebody knows how to talk to other people, to communicate, to have a conversation without getting agitated, because that adage of the customer is always right is not always right. Sometimes the customer is not right, but you don't want to make them feel bad about being wrong. And how do you deal with that? And it's important for employees to probably, be able to have some social skills in that space, which is why I'm so adamant with my daughter on, how we manage our emotions and how we work through things and those types of things, because the older I have become, the younger my employees have become. And I've started to notice a shift in some of the younger employees where they literally have an entire section of their skill set that is missing, and that's social skills. It's like they just sat at home and played video games and yelled at each other on gaming headsets for like 18 years. And then the next thing they know, now they want a job, and they can't even deal with their own emotions, let alone have a conversation with somebody. So that's one I think
first that eye to eye, like we were talking about with wrestling, sweat to sweat, eye to eye. It's very different than on headsets yelling at people.
Yeah. That's why it's funny. I see my neighbor who lives across the street, their older sister, she just left to go to the Air Force, and he's over there playing like Fortnite and all these like third person shooter games. And I'm like, hey, at one point, because he said he wants to go into the military too, I said, you should probably get outside and run around or something, because when you get to boot camp, you're not going to be on a joystick or any of that
surprise.
kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that's something that looking back, I wish I would have done is join the military. I think they have some of the best leadership training in the world. For entrepreneurs, our daughter's dating a young man that's about ready to graduate high school, and he wants to be an entrepreneur. And that's my recommendation to him is he's like the Marine Corps. It's like, hey, join the Corps for 4 years. They'll teach you how to be a leader, and then you can apply those skills to the civilian sector. And it's interesting watching him go through his process. But I mean, I would.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. I was in the Navy myself, and I'm telling you right now to this day, there are so many things that I learned in the Navy about perseverance and leadership, and just dealing with my fellow shipmates and those types of things that you can't learn that stuff anywhere else. Everybody thinks it's like, oh, you go there to get yelled at. Well, yeah, you do. You get yelled at a lot. But at the same time, there are some skills that you can't learn anywhere else.
And you learn how to have people yell at you.
Yeah, and not get mad at them. It's like what we were talking about earlier, right? It's like you get knocked down, you get back up, you get knocked down, you get back up.
Exactly. You don't melt and cry in a corner.
No, nothing like being yelled at and you just got to stand there and take it.
Oh, yeah. I feel bad for like the older generation of military people. Like, my father was in the military, and, back in those days, like your drill sergeant could hit you. Like nowadays,
crazy.
Yeah, nowadays it's like, unheard of. But I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't know. I did pretty good when I was younger, and, I did something wrong and I got corrected with a, swat to the booty or a belt or something like that. I mean, I never did that again. I can tell you that.
You learn your lesson. That's for sure.
So how did you guys approach building, your team using the Rich Dad principles when you were starting your business? I know that, you're talking about kind of some of the pieces with, sitting down and playing cash flow, but how specifically did the Rich Dad principles help you start?
There's a tool that we use called the BI triangle, business and investing. And we've used that. It's in a number of his books. We've used that BI triangle to build our business plan, to build the onboarding, to help drive some of our systems and our processes. We've found that it's a great universal tool that applies to any business because it's principally driven. And that's how we're able to build our first company, Journey, to 6 locations in multiple states. We had no money. We raised the money, we built it up, we sold it to a private equity company, and then took a year off, and then we used the BI triangle again and built our second large company, Warriors Heart. That's the one that we're operating now, which serves active military, veterans, and first responders exclusively. So drug and alcohol treatment, PTSD, trauma, wrapped around an inpatient treatment center. But it was driven through the BI triangle to build the team.
Oh, that's awesome. You talk about helping the first responders, veterans, and, PTSD is probably, it's funny. I grew up with my father who was in Vietnam. My dad was 27-year Army veteran. He was a Green Beret in the 101st Airborne and flew all kinds of crazy helicopter missions. And
right on.
My dad had probably the worst PTSD, I've ever seen. I have a bunch of friends that have gone into Iraq and come back and all that kind of stuff. But what I think was crazy at that time is the issues with PTSD. There was no magnifying glass on that at the time. Like these guys are getting, spit on and yelled at when they come back from, serving their country, and, having seen, all kinds of craziness in the fog of war, and then having to deal with that with no support system. Big kudos to you guys for having a support system, because I am the son of somebody who had PTSD, and I grew up my whole life with my father dealing with PTSD and not having any kind of outlet, or the military even recognizing that he was having a problem.
Wow.
Yeah, my dad too. He's a Vietnam vet, and same thing. They were just taught you don't talk about it. It just gets shoved down in a deep dark hole, and you deal with it the best you can, whether it's through alcohol or some other outlet, but they really don't have one. And, I'm grateful that the stigma is starting to leave and it's being talked about more and more, to where even our Vietnam vets are starting to open up.
Yeah, and I know it's so hard for those guys to open up too. Comparatively speaking, I talked to my friends who are Navy corpsmen, hospital corpsmen. They got stationed with Marine recon units, and so they were boots on the ground, just like an infantry soldier, dealing with roadside bombs and all these different things. And, even hearing my friend, talk about some of those different things that they dealt with, in Afghanistan and all that. Luckily for me, I was just on a ship. I was on a floating island, a floating city, so I didn't have to deal with, boots on the ground types of scenarios like those guys did. But, my dad though, these guys had kids with bombs in their diapers and all this crazy stuff back in Vietnam that I think that, it wasn't quite the same type of warfare that was been happening in the newer times either. And just a testament to how strong those individuals are, being able to, come back from that with no support and still, be able to raise a family and still be able to carry a job and do all of those things. And, luckily for me, my dad never got, crazy into alcohol. Like, he would have a beer and then that was all, if he had any beers. Luckily for that, but man, I could hear him at night having nightmares and cold sweats and waking up in the middle of the night. And that's where his torture was for him, for his PTSD was, all within these crazy vivid dreams that he would have. And, just not having an outlet for that, and it makes me feel really good that you guys are out there doing what you're doing and providing some help and assistance in that space. How do you guys make sure that you find the right team at Warrior's Heart? Because I know that you did the addiction treatment stuff with Journey previous, but is what you're dealing with now at Warrior's Heart, is it more sensitive or is it the same? And how do you go about making sure you have the right team for that?
Well, our team, I would say 95% of them in some way, shape, or form have either served or have a loved one that has served, whether it is military, law enforcement, firefighter. In that sense, so everyone understands either from, personal experience or through a loved one. And when our clients come in, we call them clients, not patients, because we don't want them to feel sick or in a hospital setting. That camaraderie is there instantly. It's like, you get me. You understand what I've gone through. I'm not sitting in a treatment facility across from someone who doesn't understand and just wants to hear stories like it's movie time. They're processing their own trauma, their own stuff that they've gone through. So the person sitting on the other side of the chair or even in a group has to understand. Otherwise, they're just not going to get the healing they deserve.
Yeah, and you're right. This is a specialized program. The team gets to be specialized and highly trained as well. One of the things we do is it's called Warrior Oversight. So, for example, our partner Tom Spooner, Army, retired out. He did 10 years at the unit. He was 101st Airborne, then Green Beret, then he passed selection into the unit, Tier 1 operator. And so when we have different ideas or modalities that the clinical team presents, it's like, hey, Warrior Oversight, will this work with this population? So we always have a vetting process to make sure we just don't get the good idea fairy comes in. It's like, does this work for our warrior population? And we have warriors that provide feedback to that. Otherwise, it will be ran by administration, which I think there's a lot of programs that have good intent, but there's a disconnect from the front line. You need guys that have been there, done that can provide that input of, hey man, this works, this doesn't work, let's tweak this a little bit. So as a team, we're always getting feedback, providing feedback to each other and getting feedback from our clients on what's being effective for them.
I think that's an interesting, way of going about dealing with, the clients that you guys work with, because I know that I feel so much more comfortable when I'm talking about stuff that I saw, heard, did, whatever the case may be when I was in the Navy. I feel better being able to have those conversations with another person who is in the military, whatever branch they were in, it doesn't matter. Like there's a camaraderie that's just almost identical, even though, the Marines call the Navy squids and we call them jarheads and all that kind of stuff,
crayon eaters and all that. Right. Sure.
But at the same time, at the end of the day, when we're all, back stateside and, having conversations about, who we we are and what we're doing in our lives, that portion of being in the military kind of goes away, and you have a kind of a level playing field and the ability to have some conversations that, frankly, I wouldn't even maybe have with my own wife, because she doesn't understand either.
Well, you're spot on, and that's why Warrior's Heart is unique, is that it's a license accredited program just for the warrior class. So not only are militaries, but we're also bridging the gap between the military and the law enforcement, because they're the same, built from the same cloth. Yep. That is your brother, that is your sister. So like you're talking about, the different branches still have their camaraderie, and they rub each other a little bit in a good way. Now we're seeing it too with the law enforcement side of it, and the first responders and the EMS. They're realizing, like, hey, we're all cut from the same cloth. And there was an event that happened at Warrior's Heart, which is incredible. We had a veteran come in. He attempted suicide by cop. That's when he tries to have the cops shoot him. And we had some officers in there that had a suicide by cop event. And when the two connected and they processed through what that really meant, it's like, you're asking your brother to shoot you. You know how much that is impacting us on the other side? And then the veteran, the healing that he got from when he finally realized, it'd be like, yeah, a Marine asking an Army guy to shoot you. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. So that's why we have this program. It's designed just for those warriors, for that peer network, and magic happens.
Well, and, our law enforcement firefighters, they deploy to the streets. They may not deploy overseas, but they're dealing with potential combat situations, hostile situations, protection situations on a day-to-day basis, on our own soil as well. So that camaraderie works. It's amazing to watch it happen.
Oh, you guys are 100% correct. This just happened here locally here in Phoenix, where I live, just over the weekend. I'm sitting at my house, and I hear an ungodly amount of gunfire. And it was so close. I come to find out, it was literally the next street over, and they had just like a straight-on gang shootout with two opposing gangs. The police showed up on site. And then the next thing you know, you have 4 police officers in the middle of a shootout with 12 gang members, right? And it was literally warfare in the middle of the streets. And, if you tell me today that can't cause PTSD for those officers, just the same as, a Marine guy going door to door in Iraq doing infiltration drills and such, then we can't be friends.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a scary situation for me this weekend. I saw the coroner's van leave and go back like 4 times. So,
damn.
When you talk about they deploy to the streets, they do deploy to the streets. And I'm telling you, those streets, depending on where you live, you could live in the nicest neighborhood on planet Earth. You don't know what's going on 3 streets from you.
Absolutely.
Or what have you. So big kudos.
Or even the house next door.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think my cameras point at the houses next door, so I can see what's going on.
Well played.
Thanks, Alexa. So, I know you guys are also honorary members of the Young Presidents Organization. Let's talk a little bit about that, and then I want to chat about your book, the Social Capitalist book, and what drove you guys to write that.
Sure. No, yeah, I'll speak to that. I'm a member of YPO. YPO, a Young Presidents Organization. Their sister organization, EO, Entrepreneurs. And that's a good starting for entrepreneurs. There's qualifications in order to make it, and then the step above that is YPO. And the idea of it is being around like-minded people, again, your peers. Who can I talk to about employee problems or even life problems? I shouldn't be doing that to my staff. I shouldn't be giving my staff my problems. So where do I go? So YPO or EO is a network of your peers that are having maybe some of the same struggles or have achieved some of the stuff that you're going through and could provide some guidance through it. So it's an incredible organization that does education, personal development, as well as peer network for problem solving. It could be personally or professionally.
Oh, that's awesome. I need to be a member of the YVPO.
Nice.
So you guys have traveled the world with Robert and Kim Kiyosaki and given financial education tips to entrepreneurs. I bet that was probably a blast getting to do that. Is that what led you guys into the Social Capitalist book?
It did. I'll speak a little to Lisa and then have you jump in. As entrepreneurs, we were going to the seminars, to the events, listening to Andy, Tom, Ken speak on stage. It was like, what we really resonated with is these guys are doing what they're actually talking about on stage. Like, they actually have successful businesses and they're running what they're doing. So we wanted to contain Robert, phenomenal speaker. He's a Marine though. He runs his room's tight. And it was like, I like him. I respect him. I like him. We want to continue learning from him. But his seminars, they're expensive. As broke entrepreneurs, like, man, we're getting value out of this, but what are some other ways we can solve the problem? So we found that we could volunteer. So that's what we did. We started volunteering, straightening in the chairs, hanging up the flip charts, doing registration, anything. And what was cool is then we started to learn the back end of the business, if you will, of the seminar, how to set up the room. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. And so as we're learning and serving, we started traveling with them internationally because we're like, hey, wherever you go, we're in. And then that's when our personal relationship really started to take off. I was, because of my background in martial arts, I was assigned to Robert's personal bodyguard in Malaysia. I was like, hell yeah, I'll do that. Right on. So we're in the back green room and he's getting ready to go out on stage. And he goes, Josh, tell me a little bit about your story. How'd you get here? So I told him a little bit about the story and the Choose to Be Rich and how we became students. He's like, that's a good story. You should tell it more often. Like, okay, sounds good. Well, needless did I know, he's getting ready. There's about, 4,000 people out there in Malaysia. And he looks over to me and I'm standing next to Blair Singer. He goes, hey, Josh, are you ready? It was like that moment of truth, like, oh, shit. And it was that window. It's like, I can step out and the window could be closed forever or I can go for it. So I took it. I said, yes, sir, I'm ready. He goes, all right, Blair, get him ready. So Blair goes, what are you talking about? I go, I don't know. He goes, you'll do fine. They put the mic on me and I went out on stage with Robert. And the first time was a little clunky. I mean, I was scared to death. I would have rather been in a cage fight than go out there and speak, to 4,000 people. My heart was racing. My body was freaking out. But yeah, I went through the process. Next, we traveled to Australia, and we also went to Singapore. But that's when it really came together, is he pulled Lisa up too. And that's the other half of the story, right? That's what creates oneness with Lisa and I. So we started feeding back and forth the story, and boom. Ever since then, it was like Robert would keep pulling up us on stage. And then one time we were on stage and he goes, and Josh and Lisa are writing a book, aren't they? We're like, yes, sir, we are. So those windows of opportunities, they come to all of us. It's just, do we have the guts and the faith to lean through it and to go for it? Did we make mistakes? Of course. Do I feel like I acted like an idiot on stage? Yes. But I learned from it and I got better each time. And I just kept doing it and Lisa kept doing it. And it's like, all right, we got a book and now we're talking to you on the radio show. Pretty awesome.
That's awesome. Lisa, were you scared up on stage the first few times you got up there?
I was. It's always nerve-wracking. Just, am I going to say the right thing? What if they ask a question I don't know the answer to? But once I learned to let that go and just be present, I've always found out the answers come. And yeah, I may say something that doesn't make any sense at all, but I'm not afraid to admit it. Oh, well, I don't know where I was going with that. As long as I admit it, then the audience seems to be okay with it. So it's been quite a journey. And I still speak with Kim. We speak around the world 2, sometimes 3 times a year to other women. And we've done it, in London, India, South Africa, Singapore, Russia. So still on this journey of teaching with her. And, we do a great program for women as well.
Oh, that's so awesome. I want to thank you guys for being on the show today. It's been such an honor and a pleasure hearing your story of, where you came from and how you got there and where you're at now. And that's so awesome. Before we end the show, though, I need to know, how can people help Warrior's Heart? How do they get involved? How do they, donate their time? How do they do that? Because I know that there's probably a lot of people listening that would love to know information on how they can help.
Well, Warrior's Heart is a private entity, so the treatment facility side is private, and that's just through lessons learned. I used to sit on the Arizona Governor's Commission for youth treatment, and we would provide grants to facilities, and their sustainability, if they didn't get the grant from the government, they shut their doors. So we learned, we want our facilities not to be reliant upon funding and have that mission drift to where we became a fundraising company. So Warrior's Heart is a private entity, but then out of necessity, we did form a foundation called Warrior's Heart Foundation. And that became because guys may not have VA benefits, may not have insurance. So how can they still come to treatment? Well, they can apply for a hardship, and that's through the Warrior's Heart Foundation. So it's two separate entities, ran by different boards.
But you can find us at warriorsheart.com.
That's awesome. Thank you guys again for being on the show. And for those of you guys who are listening, make sure you head on over to Amazon and go pick up The Social Capitalist and read all about the fantastic human beings we have here, Josh and Lisa Lannon. Thank you guys so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you, Ryan.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're tuned in to Finding Your Frequency right here on the Voice America Talk Radio Network. Please make sure you go check out the website at findingyourfrequency.net. And of course, we're here every Friday at 12 o'clock Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern, and sometimes we drop a few little mini-sodes, I like to call them, throughout the week. If we have some shorter interviews, I'd like to make sure that you guys get to listen to all of the meat and potatoes that we have going on here at Voice America. And again, big shout out to Josh and Lisa Lannon for joining the show today. And thanks to Liz Kelly for getting this all set up, and thank you guys again for listening. And this will round out our Rich Dad Advisor series, and we'll be coming back and doing one with Robert Kiyosaki in the next couple of weeks. I've been trying to lock him down, but he's really busy, so he hasn't said no, he won't do it. He just said he can't do it right now because we haven't found time, but we're definitely going to get that one and cap off this with him as well. And then so make sure you guys like and share this on social media. You can find me on Twitter at Radio Ryan1, and you can find Jeff at Jeff Spinney 2, and of course follow the network at Voice America TRN. Thanks for tuning in.